Hey, Joe.
Hey, Aron. How's it going?
Oh, no, I think I've lost my audio. Oh, no. Can folks hear me on the stream? I feel like I've... Okay, 1 second here, folks. This is on me. Joe, have you cut out? Or is it me? Can folks hear me? Okay, so folks can hear me. So, Joe... Oh, maybe it's here. 1 second. Let me try something.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, and Michael Collins confirms we can hear you.
Okay, everyone can hear everyone now. We're starting over. This is the edit clap. So, okay. No, it was just a OBS thing. I was just telling Joe how finicky all of this is, but we're good to go. So, Joe, welcome to Automate All the Things. It's an honor to have you back here. For folks who are not, Webflow folks who don't know you, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am the founder and CEO of Finsweet, and we are a Webflow exclusive agency, products, and community team. We do everything Webflow. And the reason I'm on this stream is because we're talking about the recent decision of Webflow to cancel their client billing initiative. So we talked about this last week on the Finsweet stream, and now I'm here today to talk about this next part. And I will say I'm excited to learn a little bit because every time I come here, every time I watch something with Automate All the Things, it's something new and it's something I learn. So I'm ready to take that next level in the Airtable setup with this.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you're being very humble. Finsweet is Webflow is one of the largest, one of their largest agency, and I think you've done so much for the community. So it's an honor to have you here. And I love the fact that you learned something. I think every time I do this stream live, I also learn something about my own workflows and how they don't work. So hopefully, I'm happy that you can learn from our mistakes and my mistakes. But as we're going to kind of kick this off, we're going to show people how to migrate off of Webflow client billing. And I'm going to preface this by saying I am not a Webflow client billing user. Everything I'm showing here was kind of, bits and pieces of the workflow. So what I'd love you, Joe, to do, and everyone in the chat, is keep me honest that maybe your workflow isn't exactly what I'm going to show. And I think that's really the exciting part. If you're saying no, I have different prices for how much I charge, or my clients are structured in this way, let me know in the chat. And that's really what I'm most excited about is I think we've built together a basics of this, right? So a basic CRM, but it's flexible to really encompass any use case. So before I jump into the fun part, the nitty gritty, Joe, maybe for folks who aren't Webflow user, I think there's still really a lot of value here, but maybe give us the overview of what is client Webflow client billing, and what are we trying to reproduce here in a separate system?
Webflow client billing is a system that allows you to charge a hosting cost directly to
Mm,
your Webflow client.
right.
So I build a site for a client, it's $16 per month for hosting, and I can add any additional amount on top of that to make money myself for
Hmm.
hosting my client's site in my
Right.
account. And Webflow has just recently announced that they are going to get rid of this feature. It's no longer
Right.
there. So anybody that's using the client billing feature has to migrate off of it.
Right.
And now, if you're going to host your client sites, you have to find a different way to bill them and to charge them for those sites.
Right. So my understanding is that you still have to pay Webflow, right? So Webflow has a per month charge, and then you're trying to get that charge from the customer so to pay that like hosting. But also what I've heard from folks on Webflow is that client billing was also kind of a constraint in that you can only charge a monthly fee instead of like having different models. Maybe you want to do a retainer a cup for 6 months, or hourly, and then have that hosting be a part of that one payment, not be like, oh yeah, you have one invoicing for my 10 hours, and yeah, if when we're going to start hosting, I'm going to send you like to another place. Your credit card doesn't work from here to there, like you got to enter it again. So really we're trying to like migrate from that and use it as an opportunity to expand to different potential billing models, and those that are closer to what the client wants. Is that the right understanding? So like solving this piece, which is just passing along that payment, but also like enabling other ways of making money off of Webflow.
That is very correct. I would say Webflow client billing is incredibly easy to use and not very flexible.
Right.
You just have the one option.
Right.
So this makes it not very scalable for a
Hmm.
lot of companies. It,
Right.
it works really well for some companies, and maybe some companies use it sometimes. But I know at Finsweet, we grew out of client billing almost immediately after it was
Right.
released a few years ago.
Right.
We just have too many different ways to bill people and too many paths to bring in that revenue. So it didn't work for us.
Right.
So this system, I'm guessing today we're going to learn a lot about that flexibility and what we
Yeah.
can really take advantage of here.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's jump in. So, folks, what I'd love in the chat is tell me about how you want to bill, right? So, do you just want to pass along that Webflow hosting, or are you like, oh, I give 10 hours up front. I want to be billed twice, like at the beginning of a project, at the middle of a project, and then a third kind of payment, in an hourly rate. So, tell me a little bit about what your different plans are, and I've invented a few here. So, with that said, let's jump into an overview of the workflow as I'm imagining it. And then I hope that'll kind of give folks ideas of like, oh no, mine is a little different. So let's jump into my little browser here. Boom. Okay. So my idea here is I'm going to use Airtable plus Stripe. Um, again, I first I work for Airtable, so it's kind of my default. But I think what I'm doing here is usable. You can use, I imagine, Trello, ClickUp, whatever. I don't want people to like get bogged down into the mechanics of like the tools that I use. Um, so what I'm imagining is you have a list of customers, or actually maybe starting first, like you have a list of products, right, that you sell. Maybe that's like the basic. So you either sell Webflow hosting, basic hosting, CMS hosting, business hosting, and then I'm imagining like an hourly rate, right? So those are the things that you sell. And I'm being trying to be very intentful of my words because I know CJ from Stripe is watching and is in the chat. So I want to mimic Stripe language here. So there are things that you sell, which we'll call products, right? But those products together go into plans. So you can imagine, see, I'm seeing some folks in the chat. Someone says, I services is something that they sell, right? So you want to say, okay, I sell business hosting plus a bank of hours. So I'm calling this hourly rate, and I only have one, which is $200. And we're going to get into like the price ID and product ID and all that stuff. And then with those two things together, I create plans, right? So I can say, hey, I'm just selling the Webflow hosting, right? Or I want to sell the business hosting plus 10 hours of my kind of like consulting, right? Or Webflow business plus 50 hours. Or maybe I'm like, I just want to sell hours of consulting. They can figure out billing on themselves, right? So there's a flexibility here that you're just saying these are the things that we sell and we package them in this way. Now, my idea here, and again, Joe, like again, keep me honest, is for each one of these plans, let's create a payment link. Now, payment links in Stripe is a hosted portal where a customer can come in, enter their information, and pay you that plan. And it works both on one time and recurring billing. So let's imagine, and I hope this works. If it doesn't, I think we'll be able to fix it. But let's say you want to create Webflow business hosting plus an hourly rate. You're going to go ahead and create a payment link. I've written up this little script that I'm happy to, open source and add in the description. And boom, you've now created that plan. So this is now something that you can send to customers that say, hey, you're paying me $45 a month for Webflow hosting business plan. And you've got 10 hours at $200 each. And the customer could go in and pay this, right? So this is like that ability to go out and pay it. This is live. That's test data, right? So now let's kind of think about, okay, I have that gate, but I also have customers who need to be associated to plans. So I have a customer table. So let's call this like Joe plus test at finsweet.com. And Joe is an amazing client, and Joe is going all in, and he wants the one we just created, which is 10 hours plus Webflow business. I can send an email automatically, like, hey, we just agreed on the phone. You can get an email, you can text that person, we can build that automation if anyone finds this interesting. And yes, we are in Airtable. But again, this works with spreadsheets. I like Airtable because it lets me associate those things like we just did, right? To say, this customer has this plan. And then I can send this specific link. Now you notice the difference with this link is that it's pre-filled. So now this customer, it says Joe at plus test at finsweet.com. And something else that's a little behind the scenes is I have a client reference ID. But every time that Joe pays me, I'm able to associate that payment back to this website, right? And if ever Joe laps payment, and we'll get into that in a moment, I'll be able to say like, yo, Joe, you didn't pay me for this specific plan that, you paid through this. So, Joe pays me and that we can set up together. And then each payment that comes in creates a line item in this table. And this is using webhooks. So I'll talk about those at the end because they're a little more complicated. But the idea is that you have products, you create plans, you associate customers to plans. Once they pay, you receive a line item of every single payment in this table. So that is my idea. And I can dig into all of this, and I'm going to show you the Stripe side, like how to set all of this up. But this is like my new idea for a CRM for Webflow client billing. Again, I'll open source this, and through the rest of the stream, we're walk through how to create each one of these things. We'll go into Stripe, we'll set that up, and then I'll show you how to run the scripts and all that. But Joe, with this, any thoughts or suggestions of does this make sense as a replacement for client billing?
I think it can absolutely be a replacement for client billing. The first thing I think of is the amount of flexibility that we have with this. In Airtable, I mean, we can set off any other types of automations or flows or
Mm-hmm.
integrate other applications or come up with all the plans. We have somebody in the comments who said it. David, monthly plus annual options.
Yeah,
You can have a whole set of links for monthly, a whole set of links for yearly, and
yeah.
based on that client, you can associate them to that payment preference. So yeah, I'm just thinking flexibility here. I think it totally works.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting here, what really struck me is if a client is like, no, I want 62 hours. And you're like, oh, man, well, how would you do that in client billing, right? You'd be like, okay, what is that monthly equivalent for a year, whatever. Here, you're just like, okay, you want Webflow business, plus 62 hours. And you say, okay, this is the first, the kind of hosting is Webflow business, right? And then, I want my 200 hourly rate. And then I get 62, right? And I'm like, okay, this client gets a hosted payment link. We're going to generate that payment link. And if you're someone who's more interested in the code of this, I'll put a link in the description for Code Meets No Code, where we walk through step by step how to create these scripts. And boom, you've got Webflow 62 hours, one kind of monthly. And then it was like, oh, I need a top up. Boom, you create a top up plan. You just create a top up, like 10 hourly rate top up. You send it back. You can send it to multiple customers. So, I'm really like excited to dig in, and I'm curious in the chat. Let me know, like, do you want to go into the weeds of how this was built? Or are folks more interested in like the high level, what's possible with this? Because I will be kind of giving the base away. So yeah, let me know in the chat. But I totally agree with you. I think there's a flexibility here, and I think things that weren't possible with Webflow client billing. And okay, so let's go over to the Stripe side. So we just did the Airtable side. Now, what I've done here is very closely mimic the structure of Stripe in Airtable. And the reason is that most of your work should happen in Airtable, because Stripe does not have like a customer management, there's it's not a CRM, right? So what we're seeing mostly is in Airtable. So the main things you need to understand is that in Stripe, you have this concept of products, right? And I've created one product for each hosting plan. And then I have one product for Webflow consulting that has, I'm only using one price, but there could be potentially multiple prices. Every one of these plans has a product ID and a price ID. When you're creating a payment link, you need to pass along a price ID so that Stripe understands what to put here. So there are actually two things that go into a payment link. It is the line items, and each line item has a product and a quantity. Sorry, it has a price and a quantity. So if you want to charge $45 for Webflow hosting, you need to pass in this price ID and a quantity of 1 for the subscription. And if you want to pass along, I want Webflow hosting business plus 10 hours of Webflow consulting at $200 an hour, you need to then pass a second line item with the price ID 200 with a quantity of 10. So that's how Stripe will understand that you want to create a payment link with those two line items, which will be reflected here. That's actually like pretty simple. That's how it works. And so from there, it's relatively simple, right? You just have payment links. Now I'm creating them from Airtable, but you could create a new payment link right here manually. Right? You don't have to use the script or write the script. You just say, okay, what product do you want? Webflow business hosting, just one. I don't want to collect tax. There are tax options for folks, right? Next, which account? We're not going to split payment. We're not that fancy. And boom, like we've just created a Webflow business hosting link. Now we can just copy that and bring it back into Airtable. So I've made it quite fancy where you need to like run a script, but there's no reason to. Like you can just go create that, bring it into Airtable, and then copy paste here. But I like having one place where I do all my work. Now the other thing, and just I'm still going through Stripe here. Once someone fills this out, right? So let's say Joe pays me. So let's go into customer, Joe plus test. Am I sending you the right one? Yeah, I give you 10 hours. Yeah, right here. Okay. Confirmation 42. So folks want me to go into the weeds. Okay, Joe, do you want me to go into the weeds as well?
Yeah, let's do it.
You're Joe Krug. I'm assuming cards are in your name, or are you like too big time? Do you have like an alias for your cards?
I do. I have an alias, many aliases.
So we're creating this payment, right? And this is going to do a few things. One, we're going to have one payment of $2,045, which is a checkout payment, right? It's a checkout payment. And then it's going to create a new customer in Stripe that is Joe, right? So it's saying, okay, I just got payment for Joe for this payment link. So if you go into customers, I see Joe test Finsweet right here as a payment. So I just received that payment of $2,045. And now I can then bring that back into Airtable. Now, if this worked correctly, I see a success right here. I don't know if that's the one we just created or not. Check automations, initial payment received. It failed. Okay, I'll fix it later together. This is actually an opportunity to do the webhook with everyone. So it creates a new customer and it creates a payment. So now What that means is we can bring back that information into Airtable. We can bring back our payments such that we're able to track the full loop. So we send that customer an email saying, "Hey, we want you to pay this plan." They pay it, and then we see the payment in Airtable. Are there any, like, I want to make sure that it's clear, like you can do this all in the Stripe dashboard, but I'm doing it in Airtable because I'm fancy. Any questions about the Stripe dashboard that folks have? Joe, I'll let you be the voice of like the Finsweet user, but also happy to go into the chat with any ideas of questions.
Well, we use Airtable for a lot of different things.
Mm,
We're heavy Airtable users. So the idea of being able to integrate the payment side of it with other Airtable management tools is really nice. But if you're watching this and you're thinking, "Hey, Airtable's just a little bit too much for
mm,
me. Maybe I don't need it. Maybe my
mhm,
business is just a little smaller." I think just Stripe only is a great option. And understanding this system and how it works is super important. I think, yeah, it's such a scalable platform. We talked about this last week. I
mhm.
get so excited with platforms like Stripe.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and and it's weird because I always come on the stream and I'm like, here's like the 2000%, you're all in on this kind of framework, and you want to do everything in one platform, but frankly, like for my, if someone comes and says I want to sponsor the AATT newsletter, or I want to sponsor the stream, which actually you're the only sponsor, and I say no to everyone else, but um, I actually just create a payment link and I'm like, here's a payment link, pay it. I don't need an accountant or anything like that. Like, I don't need a CRM because I'm just like, I have one sponsor for the newsletter on a monthly basis. And so absolutely you can do everything in Stripe. And then you're like, oh, I can't manage all of this in Stripe, or my accountant wants to see payments. Or there's a great question from Penny, like, can you split out the service fee in Airtable? And you could absolutely do that using webhooks. um, there's a great question from Mixel, which is, can I explain the structure of Stripe? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So in Stripe, what you need there, I don't know how deep I want to go here, but every product can have multiple prices, right? So I have one product and price for each Webflow hosting plan. So I have business, hosting, CMS, and basic. And then my Webflow consulting has two prices. So that is our first model. Our first kind of table, if you will, or thinking, is that we have products that can have multiple prices. Every product is something we sell. It could be t-shirts, it could be whatever, like a product is something you sell. And you should have one product for each thing that you sell. The reason we've split out these into different prices is that you have different tiers. So there are different, like, Webflow sells different things based on what plan you're on. And so you should have one plan for each price. Then it's actually quite simple. Then you just have a customer model, right? Which is the people making the payments. And if you're creating an invoice, in invoices, you know who the customer is and you know what product they want. And you send the invoice with both of those ahead of time. You're saying, send this customer this product and they will pay. Payment link is actually saying, I might not know who the customer is up front. So let me create a hosted place where that customer can come and make the payment. And then I could send that link to multiple potential customers. So what's interesting here is payment links allows you to say, I will sell this subscription or these bundle of products potentially to multiple people. So I don't want to generate an invoice each time. I just want to generate one hosted place where folks can come and pay, and then we're good to go. Um, and so, sorry, you got forgot to remove the dog. This is just such a good question. So yeah, so I was here in products talking about prices with products. So each product has multiple prices, and customers, if you already know the customer and the product, you should go to an invoice. But if you are going to sell a bundle of products to multiple customers, you should use payment. Um, there you go. And CJ's adding a little bit of context there, so that's great. Um, and so when you think about it, I've recreated that same thing in Airtable. I'm saying here's a one-to-one mapping between what's here to Airtable, right? And what I'm creating is every payment link is a plan, what I'm calling a plan, which has either a hosting service, right? The different Webflow hosting services, or a monthly bucket, or sorry, a bucket of hourly rates that I'm putting together and sending to a payment link. Does that make sense? Hopefully to folks. Okay. So then, I know, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you create too many products to sell? Like, for example, at Finsweet, we have 8 different hourly billing rates
Right.
for all different types of people.
Yeah.
And then we have different charges for different types of site, and there's just so many options.
Yeah.
Is there any downside to creating a whole bunch of plans?
I would say not necessary. I think the risk you have is just like getting lost in them, right? So let's say
Mm,
someone wants 62 hours, someone else wants 65 hours and 67. And I think another risk in terms of just management, especially as you get into like the big, not amounts, but number of clients, is it could become difficult to track if one customer is on multiple payment links. So let's say
mm,
you sold a customer like 12 business hosting plans and they don't pay on one of them. It might be difficult just in this model to be able to say like this non-payment is related to this specific hosting plan, but it will be easy to say that non-payment is specific to this customer. So I would argue that from a business wise, you just want to reduce the number of like things that you sell. So if someone wants 62 hours, you say I only do 100 or I do 50, right? Just because
mhm.
that's like it's easier for you, it's easier for them, right? But from a purely, and CJ, keep me honest here, from a purely like structure, there's no that you can do as many as you'd like. You might say I want
Okay.
63, 63.5. Actually, no, maybe not point
Sure.
0.5, but 110, 120. There's no, and there was someone else in the chat that said, can I bring in project management or hourly billing? You absolutely can, right? So because you have your customers here, you could have, you know, um, time tracking and then start tracking the time you do per customer and be very accurate to that customer to be like, hey, like you we're over our time, right? Like I have an hourly breakdown because I'm tracking that in Airtable. So there's a lot of flexibility here that I think is really, really interesting. Um,
Cool.
so let's get into some of the weeds here, right? Which is okay. Let's imagine you copy paste this thing and you're like, okay, I can create. I've created my products. I've created my plans. I've got my payment links. Let's just create a few payment links. Payment link. This is me just showing off the script. Am I proud of it? Absolutely. And did someone help me? Absolutely. CJ, huge shout out for helping me, write this code. Um,
Nice.
Okay, so we've just created 7 payment links, and these cover the gamut of this person just wants business hosting. This person just wants, business hosting plus a specific hourly rate. Um, yeah, so Robert says, can you just have an increment? Absolutely. Instead of just a specific quantity here, right? This is what I love, right? We can get really geeky. Instead of a specific number of hours, you can create an increment, right? And then just create a formula field that has that like increment times the number of hours. And that's what's going to show up on the payment link right here. So you can absolutely change this to increment. Okay, so you're like, okay, I've got the payment links. How can I make it easy to send it to the customer? So one idea I have is like just create an automated email, right? So let's say I want to send this payment link. So what I've done here is I've created, okay, Joe, I've associated Joe to the Webflow business plus 10 hours as a linked record. And then I pulled in the specific Stripe link. And then I pre-filled it with Joe's email and the record ID. So any payments can come back in. And we'll do that in a moment because it's broken anyway. So let's go ahead in automations. And then we're going to say, okay, send email to customer. So when a record matches conditions, and let's just see what condition. Okay, so I just want this little check mark to send an email to the customer with this link. Note, if you are unfamiliar with Airtable automations, it looks very much like Webflow logic. The only difference is that it exists and you could use it. That was a little knock. I love the Webflow folks. I'm joking. I'm joking. No one tell the Webflow folks I said that. Um, so, um, good question from Christian. I'm going to get into that in just a moment. Can you generate an invoice? And the answer is absolutely. Okay, so what I want is when I check this send email, it goes ahead and sends an email to the customer. So the table is customers. I'm gonna hear about that. I've been planning that joke for like a week. So when
That's a good one. I liked it.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, I appreciate that. So when send email is checked, right? That's what is going to trigger this automation. That's when it's going to put it in motion. What I want to go ahead and do is send an email, right? So I can send an email from Airtable, which is maybe not ideal for most folks, but you can also send an email from Gmail, right? I don't think I have my Gmail account. No, I don't. But let's just send it from Airtable. It'll be an example, but you can send it as yourself, right? And then say to, and then we're going to pull in the customer. So I'm going in step 1 where we've pulled in that information. We're going to pull in the email. And then we're going to say your, and then look at this fanciness. We're going to go into the plan. And we're going to insert the name. So it's going to say your Webflow business hosting plus 10 hours of consulting. And then we can say, hi, here is a link to pay your plan. Boom. And we're going to go with the payment link send, where I've done that. And then let's generate a preview. Actually, let's generate a preview, run tests. Oh, right. I gotta, send an email to test this out. No records match the condition. That's actually pretty cool. It's new from Airtable. You can generate a preview. We're saying, okay, we're going to run the test for all of these. This is a record that we want to run it for. It ran successfully. It's generating a preview. So it says, hey, your Webflow business plus 10 hours. Hi, here is a link to pay your plan. You can add markdown, right? That just says like, here is a link. You can link it here. So it just doesn't have that whole URL. Boom. And now, so my recommendation for folks is like, yes, you're going to call your customers, all that, but just create a list of all of your customers, what plan you want them on, talk to them one by one, and then you could just send your email after that conversation as a follow-up, like, hey, by the way, right after you're done, you could just go send email. And that's a good way of migrating. So you have that conversation as we were talking last week with your customer. Hey, can we just agree that this is the right plan for you? It's going to start at this day, blah, blah, blah. Checkbox, send email, and you're going to get an email right after with the right payment link, and it's correctly pre-filled. So that customer comes on, it has the right pricing, it has their email, and we can fill in the information.
Nice. I love the customization options for the email side.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people in this industry, they want the email in a certain way.
Yep.
I like the Gmail connection where you can send it direct from your Gmail and it just looks like a handwritten message.
Mm-hmm.
Simple plain text.
Yep.
And sometimes I would use like a Zapier for that.
Hmm.
But you could do that right inside of Airtable.
Yeah.
So you really you could say exactly what you want in the email. You can add other information to that email. So this is the type of flexibility that I would have in mind for going into something like Airtable here.
Yeah. And I think what I've seen done as well, like I'm always a little hesitant to like send an email that feels automated. So you can actually send it to yourself
Hmm.
and then copy paste it to the client, right? I've done that when I was a little more not junior, I would say, but just a little more stressed out. Now I have a stream and I make mistakes, so if I email a client with the wrong payment link, I don't, I'm like, oh, that's too bad. That's too bad. But
Sorry.
I used to be a little more stressed out, and you could send it to yourself. So that's an example of just an automation, right? So when you think about it, like, okay, you've got your product set up, you've created your plan, you've imported every single one of your customers, you've spoken to them, right? You said, hey, you're going to get an email with this. We're migrating for this reason. Do you want a couple more hours, right? Can we do all that? You send them the email, they receive a link, they pay it. Now, there's a lot of questions, I think, in the chat, especially from Penny and others, of like, okay, how do I track the payments that come back? So a little bit of theory here is that most of these will have subscriptions. So when you're paying a payment link, you have two steps. There are many more steps, but the first is you have a checkout. So what that means is that the person paid this whole amount. So this whole amount is your first payment of hosting and a set of hours. Now, the set of hours, there are no other like payments after, so it's done, right? But the hosting is a subscription. How Stripe thinks about a subscription, it is a series of invoices that is auto paid with the card on file. All that to say, if you want to track payments in Airtable, there are actually 3 steps you need to do. First, you need to track the checkout completion. So, did the person pay the checkout? That's number 1. Number 2, did they pay the invoice? So, is invoice paid? And third, is invoice failed? So, did they fail to pay the invoice? So, I'm going to do an example of how to set up that first one, the full amount paid out. And then I'll just kind of talk about how to do the others, the invoicing, as examples. But those are the 3 buckets that you need to track. Did they pay the checkout? Sorry, did they check out of the first initial payment link? And are they on payment with each invoice? So I'm just checking the chat. So there's a question, wish we could add custom fields to payment links. Quick note here, you can actually add a customer reference ID, and that's what I do here. And that's actually going to come into when we do the webhook side. So I've created, it's not custom per se, but at least you can have a client reference ID. And my recommendation here is actually that you take the record ID in Airtable, right? This right here. We've moved this around. And that way you can associate it to the right customer. And if you have multiple customers on multiple plans, at least the record ID will be unique. Whew. Okay, that was some geeky stuff. But okay, so let's talk about, Joe, does that make sense? Am I going too quickly?
No,
Okay.
I think this is great. Yeah, keep going.
Okay, so here we want to start tracking what payments we've received. So for instance, I want Joe's payment to appear here and be associated to Joe. Now, how that works in Stripe is they have my favorite thing in the world, webhooks. So webhooks are essentially saying they're a call. So when something happens in Stripe, it's gonna say like, okay, this happened. Who do you want me to tell about this, right? And how applications communicate through webhooks is through URLs. So what that means is I'm gonna create a URL in Airtable that says, okay, when the checkout has been completed, Stripe is going to call this number. Make sure to pick up this number at all times. And Airtable is going to be like, yeah, I'm always watching the phone. I'm always watching the phone for Stripe to call me to say, I've received a payment. And that conversation will be like, okay, I've received a payment for Joe in this amount. Can you create a record in Airtable? And Airtable's going to be like, of course I can. That's what I'm paid here for. And they literally never sleep. So it's awesome. So we're going to create an automation here. And I've kind of already created it, but let's do it from scratch. Why not? Let me turn this off. New automation. And we're going to say initial payment reception. Boom. And then when a webhook is received. So I'm going to copy that URL. So this is saying, this is the phone number that Stripe needs to call. And CJ is the person who helped me with that analogy when I was wrangling with webhooks. So I already have one set up, but let's let me sunset this one. Disable. We're doing it live. So I'm adding a new endpoint. The endpoint URL. So this is saying what phone number do you want Stripe to call, and it's going to be that Airtable URL, and then we're going to be so this is when initial payment paid. And then I have events. So this is saying I'm going to call this number only when these things happen. What are the things you want me to call Airtable for? And we want checkout. So check out session completed. Now, a thing here, and there are a lot, a lot of webhooks, right? So literally, there's not much that happens in Stripe that there isn't a webhook for. So one little thing is that you might get confused of like which webhook should I be using, and when that's the case, you should tweet at CJ or me. I don't have a good answer for, or read the documentation, or join Code Meets No Code and ask. Right. So check out session completed. There we go. Add that event, and we're only going to have this specific event, and this is something that folks should know. How Airtable works is that if you have multiple types of webhooks being sent to Airtable, you shouldn't send them to the same URL. You should have a one-to-one mapping between the data structure or the webhook from Stripe into Airtable, because Airtable will just take the first webhook, look at its structure, and go down the tree. If the structure changes, which it does for different webhooks, it'll be like, oh, I don't understand this webhook. I don't understand this conversation. So you should give it a separate phone number, a separate URL. Okay, add that endpoint. So let's actually pay again, just because I want to see this event. All right, so let me go back here. Let's imagine that Joe's a really, really sweet guy and he paid me twice, and I'm never going to tell Joe about it. Boom. 4242. Oh, also pro tip, if you're ever in like the Stripe world and someone makes a joke about 4242, that's because it's the test credit card. I don't want to tell you how long I was on Twitter and I was like, I have no idea what these 4242 jokes mean. Just, word of caution if you're entering that world. Okay. Now it should be done. And the reason it's taking long is just because I have a bunch of webhooks it needs to fire, and this is in test mode. So there we go. Fresh here. Okay, so we just received that webhook. So this is the conversation that Airtable and Stripe are currently having. It's saying, okay, I paid 20,000 cents, so 2,045, right? There was no tax. There's all this information coming in here. What we want is to send this information over to Airtable. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to initial payment received, and I'm going to test the trigger. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, me and Stripe just had a conversation, right? And it's the exact same thing. It said, okay, here's what I got. I got this data. It's in this object. They told me that this person paid 204,500 cents. For some reason, it's in cents, but I'm sure there's a good reason for that. And now I'm going to say, like, okay, when you have that conversation, go ahead and create a record in Airtable that, says that Joe paid this amount. So we're going to go ahead and create a record in our payments table. And it says, okay, well, what should I fill out? So the amount, right? So the amount in cents. We're going to go to step 1. I think folks can see. I can zoom in if needed. We're just going to go down that data tree, right? So I'm going into data, going into object, and then amount total. I'm inserting that and saying that's what you should put there. There you go. Payments. Okay, so there's a lot of really interesting questions. I'm gonna set this up and then I'm gonna jump to it. So then I want amount cents, status. I want success, right? So this is a correct payment. So I want status equal to success. And then I want to associate to the customer. Now remember that the way we paid this webhook, if I go into the webhook, there should be a customer. Oh, did we not include it there? Customer client reference ID right here. This is where I get geeky, right? Because I specified that this customer client reference is a record ID. So now I can go to the customer table, find that record, and associate the right one. So before step 1, I'm going to go ahead and add an action, and I'm going to find a record. Can I move these two? Oh, no, I can't anymore. Okay, so, I can add an action above. Good. Okay, find record. Let me delete this one. And this might be like a small thing, but this is a lot of consultants told me this. Like maybe the email that they use on this link is not the email you sent it to. Maybe someone else is paying or whatever. So you still want to associate it to the right customer, to the right site. That unique record ID will not change based on the email. So let's go into customer. We're going to find a rate based on condition. And I want where did I have client ID? Yeah, I think client ID is what I called it. Client ID. Yeah, client ID is just a formula for the record ID. Yeah, there you go. So find it and go to step 1, dynamic. Go to the webhook, go to the body, go to the data, go to the object, and we want client reference ID. Let's test that. And there you go. It found this record right here, Joe plus, that's exactly the record we want. And then create the record. We're going to associate that customer with that record ID from step 2. And then we just want table record ID, insert. And then we're going to run as configured. So what we're hoping to see here is a line item with that whole payment of $204,500. Thank you, Joe, for paying so much money. Right, so it just went ahead and created that right here. So we have payment from Joe of this amount at this moment. It was successful. We can see the plan that they paid and the payment date. That's now live. So anytime someone checks out, right, of your payment link, this is automated. Right? So that means you're receiving it. There's like, you don't need to worry about it. You send that payment link, they paid, they text you like you paid, and you text them back and you go, I know. That's how good I am. I know you paid me. I knew before, like right after you press good, you're like, I know you paid. And what's cool, you can also like send yourself a text message. You can send yourself an email to let, you Slack message, whatever you want. You can do all that stuff from here. So that was how you track the initial payment. And I got a little excited there, I must say. So I'm gonna take a breath here and kind of go into the chat, see if there are any questions. Joe, any questions from your end?
Yes, some questions from the chat.
Mm-hmm.
We have Edgar Antonio Hez saying, "Darn, Airtable looks fun," and it is.
Absolutely.
What we just saw here was very, very interesting work, very cool work. Understanding how this works unlocks so many other opportunities. And then I'd love to bring up a question from Robert. Robert is asking, thinking along the lines of customer X paid me for 10 hours. How
Mhm.
many of those hours have I worked for them and how many do I still have left? So this right here, what we're looking at is a client billing base.
Mhm.
If I were to build this, this would probably start as a client billing base and then
Mhm.
turn into a client CRM.
Absolutely.
You can manage projects here. You can manage hour tracking here. You can manage phone calls here. You can,
Mhm.
you can manage anything about your clients and all the tables can link all to that one customer. So, Robert, what I would do here is use this setup and also have a table for hours worked. And you
Mhm.
can track, I've worked this many hours. This was the last time I sent them an invoice. These are the remaining hours that this client still needs to be billed for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would turn this into a CRM. That's how I would manage it.
Yeah. Do we want to like do a really quick one? I can take like 5 minutes and build one really fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So every plan, um, every plan has a number of hours, right? So number of hours, right? And then I could do a lookup from the plan. I'm not sure I structured this perfectly for that. Yeah, hours. Okay, great. Right. So Joe has 10 hours. This is like the total that I need to work. Right. So I can just create like a time tracking table. It's actually going to go much faster than I thought. Pretty proud of myself, I have to say. So I'm going to associate it to the customer. So which customer am I currently working on? Right. I'm going to link to another record. I'm linking to the customer table. Let's say the first person I'm working for is Joe. And then, I would just do hours. And then let's say, actually, I can do like a start time. Start time. Time field. Right. I started working for Joe today at 12. I'm billing you for this, Joe. This is a this is a real
Keep it low, please. Keep it low.
I'm sending you a payment link after this. And then end time, it's gonna be a time field, date field, yeah, sorry. Include a time field. Boom. Now, I think I might have gotten myself into a pickle here because I'm going to start having doing like date time diff in hours. I can still figure it out. And then, time is going to be a date. It's going to be a formula field that says date time diff between start. I always get these wrong, so it might be negative. Oh, I need to put like hours, so it's giving me seconds, right? So I just need to hours, give me that in hours. And I did mix them up, so let's just switch these. Save. Okay, so I worked 1 hour, right? But then let's say I do like another hour. Let's just duplicate this record. So now I'm at 2 hours. What I want that reflected here to have a balance of hours. So I've already associated these two records. So there's like a timestamp. I've worked 1 hour here, and I've worked another hour here. So all I need to do to create a bank of hours is roll up. So total hours worked. We can roll up between the time tracking table. I want to roll up the time I've spent, and I just want the sum of those values. So this is saying sum every single hour I've worked, and then I have 2 versus 10. So last thing, I have bank of hours, and it's going to be a formula field, which is the difference between total number of hours in the plan minus total hours worked. Boom. So we're at 8 hours left. And there you can like be really fancy. You can say when that goes to negative, create an automation that, sends you a Slack message to say, hey, time to send them another payment link. And then you can start tracking on that new payment link those hours worked, right? So this actually scales pretty well.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Some clients don't care about an itemized hour list. And they actually ask, they don't want it. They just give me the number, I'm going to pay the number.
Right.
Some people really want that itemized list. So when you put I worked 1 hour, you can also put a description there.
Right. Absolutely.
This is what it's for.
Yeah.
And then maybe you can even add that into the email that sends them the payment link. Hey, Aron, I did this itemized. Here's the total. Here are the descriptions. Here's the payment link to pay for these services.
Yeah. Okay. I've one
now
more.
It's a system.
I have one more. Last thing, and I promise I'll end here, and then I'll kind of wrap it up so folks. You can actually create an email digest for that client for the amount of time that you worked. Right. So there's a thing here. Send a weekly email digest. So I'm just going to do this. So add a schedule time. Find the records. So you can say, where the creation date of the record was in the last week, and then send an email with let's just, let's see if I could test that. Will that work? Yeah, here you go. So you can send here are the 2 records of your work. And then, can I generate a preview? Oh, I got to test this test trigger. And then generate a preview. Oh, I got to. So you can imagine, come on. Isn't it clear we're on a stream? Got no time for this stupid stuff. Come on, Airtable. Okay, here, Generate preview, here we go. You can say, hey, here are the different line items for this one looks a little janky. You can actually make it a little more, instead of an HTML list. Go to step 2, records. As a grid. Name, customer, start time, end time, description, insert, and this. Let's generate a preview. And yeah, you could say here are the 2 things I did for you. I started here, I did this, here's how much it cost you. The email will look better in your inbox, but that's an idea as well. So you can, every week, you can send out, here's what we did for you, and here's how many hours you have left. I might be going a little too far in terms of automation. I don't recommend you like blast out every customer every week. Like, here's the itemized list of everything we've done. But you can create these automations however you want. Now, the last thing I do want to say, we have 5 minutes here, is that I only did one webhook for the payment received. Now, the exact same process can be done for invoice paid. So if you want to track those subscriptions, so let's just quickly do this. Add an endpoint. Don't like you'll get the URL and then you'll have invoice paid. That means that that monthly payment for Webflow hosting has passed. And then you have payment failed, which means that either they had a credit card that went in or out, went became lapsed, or they have no more funds, whatever. It's just going to tell you like, hey, you need to follow up with this client. So you should create one for invoice paid and then another webhook for invoice payment failed. So you get each one here, and with those three, you should have your 3 use cases covered. I've received the initial payment. I've received the follow-up subscription. The follow-up subscription failed. And those should be 3 separate webhooks that you're able to set up. Yeah. Cool. What else I think we got 4 minutes. What else? Do folks have questions? Curious.
I don't see any specific questions of what we can cover in 4 minutes. A really nice comment from Joel Whitaker. This is great. I didn't realize how powerful payment links were. There isn't much difference from the normal Stripe subscription and product flow.
Yeah, actually,
I think
yeah. So I think payment links is actually like, let's take that flow which a developer builds and just make it accessible to folks who don't write code. And with a little bit of code, with a little bit of here and there, you can auto create those payment links. You can get your webhook set up. So so yeah, it's actually like harnessing the power of Stripe, which developers have been using for years, and giving it to everyday folks like us.
question from Edgar. So let's say I want to try this and connect Airtable with Stripe. What's the best way to start from zero? Well, I would say check out our stream last week. We were on last Thursday and we went over the basics of Stripe. We walked through the platform. We didn't go into Airtable at all. Start there,
Mm-hmm.
then get into Airtable, get into this stream.
Yeah.
I would say this would be more intermediate level. You would need a little bit of Airtable knowledge, and then with that, you can implement a system like this.
Yeah. And
Aron, do you agree?
yeah, not only that, but I do think like too often people automate too early, right? Um, they're like, oh, I need to build a CRM that tracks time, that does all this, and I'm like, you're not doing that now, right? So what is like? I have this like pain threshold. What is like the most painful thing that you can solve easily? If that's just creating payment links for all of like, create your products, create your payment links, send them out manually, get payment, get comfortable with Stripe, and then your business grows and you're like, okay, I need a CRM that's integrated with Stripe. Then you can start having a customer table and then just tracking your customers. Don't worry about automating it. And then you're like, oh, I'm getting too many payments, I need to track all these things. Then start mirroring Stripe, start tracking your payments, time tracking, like really go one table at a time, one input at a time. And then I think you'll be surprised in like 6-7 months. You'll be like, oh my God, like I don't even go to Stripe anymore, or I don't need to worry about it. I get notifications for all the right things. So that's my recommendation, and don't automate too much. So cool. Okay. Well, that's awesome. I will put links in the description for the base. If you're interested in learning the code part of this, right? So we wrote a little bit of code for the script. If you're interested in learning how to write that code, join us in Code Meets No Code, AATT, for a $50 discount. I will be back next week with how to add a map to Webflow, actually. So how to create custom maps in Webflow. We're going to be building kind of a database with locations for restaurants and things like that. So I'll be back then, and then I'll be Nanen. I don't know how to say that word. I'm going to figure it out with Jason, which is a new automation tool. And then we're back with Coded the following week. So I hope to see you then, Joe. As always, it was an honor, a pleasure to have you here. And I hope we do this again soon.
We will. Thank you very much, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, thanks to everyone for joining. I hope to see you next week. Hope to see you in Code Meets No Code and all the different automate all the things stuff. It was a pleasure. Thanks again. And I will see you back next week. Bye, y'all. Bye, Joe. Have a great day.